you don't ever have to think about retirement. You can keep working. And I think the thing with Clint is he was an actor, and he learned his craft on a television series, Wagon Train, and he wanted to direct. And when you want to get into this business, you have to determine how you're going to open the door. And for Clint, it was a movie called Play Misty for Me. I'm sure Karan knows it. And Play Misty for Me was a movie, even though he was a very highly paid actor in television this was in the 1960s, he wanted to become a director, and when he was being directed in feature films, I know his mentor was really Don Siegel. He finally decided to take that step forward, and he went to the head of the studio at Universal at the time, which were doing the television series Wagon Train, and they were gonna, and he had read a script called Play Misty for Me. He wanted to direct it and star in it, and being a true studio head, Lou Wasserman said to him, you can be the director, but you have to do it for this price, and you have to work for scale as an actor, which means, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the way that our pay systems work in the United States, but most performers belong to the Screen Actors Guild, and most people that work behind the camera belong to a union called IATSE, or I belong to the Directors Guild Union, and I'm also a member of the Producers Guild Association, and I'm also a member of the Academy. So we have a bunch of these, and basically making movies in the States a lot of times, they're unions. I mean, there are independent films that are made non-union, but those are a rarity. And so getting back to Clint, that's how he got his first opportunity to direct. He didn't make much money, but it was a movie it's a good movie. And it was his first effort, and that began his directing career. And then when it started, I mean, it's a whole different animal when you're a star of a movie as well as directing the movie as well as producing the movie. So he sort of wore three hats. And when I met him on Any Which Way You Can, it was the first time where he said, I'm going to have somebody else direct it. And the truth is why I wasn't hired to do work on Any Which Way You Can. I was hired to work on a movie called Firefox. And in 1980, visual effects had not reached the level they're at now. And we had so many visual effects in Firefox, we had to figure out how to do it, and we underestimated the time to do it. And Clint is always known for being able to shoot a movie very quickly, very efficiently, and also prep a movie very quickly. And so the reason I have done 17 movies with Clint in only, I don't know, a 10-year period is because we were usually prepping a movie or posting a movie or shooting a movie, and sometimes we were doing both. We were in post and shooting another movie, and so it was a good way to work. And I think a lot of that was just because he came from a television background, and in TV, the clock is always running, you don't usually have the luxury. So I enjoyed it, and that was the first film I did with him.
When you were as young as most of the audience members here, was it films that was always on your mind? How did you decide to deal with that?
I actually didn't, I was always, I was brought up to believe we can do anything we want to. And there are no barriers, there's no limitations, except those limitations you put on yourself. And so I didn't have any aspirations to go in film. I didn't know what I wanted to do, to tell you the truth. But
so awesome. I still don't know what I want to do.
I still am trying to do other things as well. But anyway, I was living in a place called Laguna Beach, California, and my sister came home one night and said they're shooting a movie down at the Cove right below us. And so I went down, and they were shooting a night scene in a movie, and I had never been around a movie set before, and it was magic. There's a certain magic about what we do. And it's very, you just take a dead space and you put and somebody makes a decision to put a camera there and the actor's there, and it suddenly becomes energized. And this was a beautiful cove which we had used anyway, and for whatever reason, they had decided to film in Laguna. Most movies they shoot in Long Beach and Los Angeles don't go all the way to Laguna Beach. But they had decided to come down there. So anyway, I went down and I watched them work all night. And it was a movie called Diary of a Mad Housewife, and the leading actor was a guy named Richard Benjamin. And the irony was, that was in, when was that? That was like 1970, and 15 years later I was Richard Benjamin's assistant director on a movie. So it kind of came full circle. Yeah, but so then I said, geez, I saw these guys, and you know, I knew what I didn't want to do in life was to have to wear a suit to the office and work a 9-to-5 job and wait for the time you're 65 years old and somebody gives you a gold watch. That kind of bothered me, and I wanted to be freelance, and you know, I had a different lifestyle. I was a surfer, really, and you know, it was, I didn't want to be committed to a job where I had to work 50 weeks a year for a 2-week holiday. And I liked that evening when I talked to some of the people on the show, I liked the nature that they kind of all come together for a project, and after that project they all disband and come together on another project. It just seemed, you know, great. And I come from a family of artists where you work really hard on a project, on a commercial or whatever, and then you disband, and I just like that idea. So then I thought, okay, I'm just going to go to Hollywood, and I'm going to work in the movie business. And then I realized, once I started knocking on doors and making phone calls, I wasn't bashful, and I wasn't rude. I just wanted to work in the movie business, and they'd say, what do you want to do? And I said, I don't know, I'll do anything. And I went to the various unions, and it was a catch-22. I don't know if you know that expression, but it was, the unions would tell you, you can't work you can't join our union until you work on a movie, and the movies would say, well, you can't work on the movie until you're a union member, and so you just keep chasing your tail over and over. And in those days, nepotism was fairly rampant. Nepotism is when people just hire other members of their family, really. And it was so rampant that they were starting to break up the unions a bit. But I couldn't get in, so I decided, okay, if I can't get in any of these unions, I'll go back to university. I'd already gone to 2 years of a college. And so now I could go to a university, but I came out of the 2-year program, and I didn't know what I really wanted to do. But while I went to college, those 2 years, I worked in a photography store, and that kind of got me interested in photography, because it wasn't just for, I mean, the public could come, but it was for professional photographers. And I would look at the work that they would do, and I would listen to them, and I was exposed to a different kind of artist. And it energized me, you know, I liked that. And so then I decided I would go back to the university, and now I had a focus. I was going to go to to university, and I decided to go to Canada mainly because it was always very difficult for me to go to school, because I lived at the beach, and the beach is there, and the waves are there, and the surfing is there, and if it's a nice day, it's very difficult to go to school. So I decided, I had a friend who lived in Canada, and I went up there, and I went to the University of British Columbia, and I studied. They had film courses, but they did not really give a degree in film. They gave a degree in theater arts. But it was great, as I was saying earlier, when I going to a Canadian university, I look back on it, I was blessed, and I'm very grateful that I started at a Canadian university, because I was exposed to, I had professors from London, from Sweden, from Germany, from a lot of foreign countries, and even if they didn't teach film, they were teaching theater. So I was exposed to Shakespeare and Ibsen and Chekhov, Russian plays, and it was a more well-rounded training. And then when you were accepted into the theater arts program, I had to interview with the department chair, And he said, what do you want to do? And it was the same thing. I don't know really what I want to do. I want to work in film. I don't want to be an actor. I think I want to be a director. You know, yeah, okay, I'll tell you, I want to be a director. So he actually took an interest in me. It just takes, you know, somebody in your positions to take an interest in a student and say, okay, we'll try to make your dream come true. And he said, if you really want to be a director, you need to understand acting. So I'm going to make you enroll in all these acting courses, which I did not like at all. I felt very uncomfortable, but it gave me a real appreciation for what actors do. And you'd be surprised at how many people that I've worked with, especially directors, who are intimidated by actors. That's their job, is to direct actors, but they've never really had the training. And I feel blessed that I did have the experience of having to do scenes on a stage, and even though I was very uncomfortable, it just gave me, an insight into how precious the job of acting really is. And then, so I took all the courses I could at the University of British Columbia, and then I decided, they were all theater courses, and I decided to go back to UCLA, which had more courses in film, and that's where I graduated. And then I just, you know, slowly worked my way into the business. It's, I mean, there was somebody had told me, take whatever, if you want to work in the film business, there's no job too low for you. So, and the truth is even as a producer today, if somebody needs a cup of coffee, I'm giving them a cup of coffee. It's no different than I was 40 years ago, really. But, so right after university, I was very lucky. I went to work for a manager who wanted to become a producer, but he managed a lot of actors. And so I was blessed because it was Los Angeles, and his clients all lived there, and so I got to know, you know, suddenly people I was watching on television, I was working with on a daily basis, reading scripts for them, and, you know, working with them and their assistants, and so that was valuable. And I did that for 6 months, and then I became an assistant director. And as I said on the first movie, Any Which Way You Can, I was a second assistant director, then I moved up to be a first assistant director, and then producing. And then in there for a while, I directed for a very brief time.
At this point, there are any questions? It could be related to what he spoke about, or something completely, I don't know, related to, of course, yes.
Mike?
And please do not hesitate. Here's your chance to ask questions to David directly. So please just raise your hands and ask questions. And I request the volunteers to please stand there and make sure that.
So Avatar was one of the films I saw when I was as a kid, and that was like the only film which I haven't slept through the whole film in theaters. I'm so sorry.
So I just want to know that how was your reaction when you got to know about the idea of Avatar movie, or read the script about it? Like, how did you thought about it and then portrayed it on the film? Because at that time, that film was way ahead of its time. So.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I caught all of the question. Avatar was the pick?
Okay. So, like, I want to know about what was your reaction or the first thought you got after having seeing the idea or the script of Avatar, and how did you portray it in the film?
So when the script of Avatar, and correct me if I'm wrong, came to you, when did you decide that, yes, I want to sort of produce it? And did it not come across to you as a shock? Because what she's trying to say is, it was way ahead of its time. Why did you gamble on that one?
Okay, let me explain how that worked, because there, as a producer, I mean, it's very hard to define the role of a producer, because on every, at least for me it is, and I'm called a producer or an executive producer at times. And on each project is different, because each project has a different set of challenges. And on the first Avatar, I was not involved at all. I was a huge fan of the first Avatar. I loved it, but I only saw it as you did, as a theater goer, a film goer. And it wasn't until just about 7 years ago, I guess, 7 or 8 years ago, that I was, and as a producer, I should go back and just define the job of a producer. It's a long-winded way, but we have some time. Is that sometimes you find your own projects. You know, you read a magazine article, you read a book, you read a script, whatever, and then you put all of the components together, and you decide this is the movie I want to make, and it's yours. And other times, you take that script, and when you're taking it around to find financing, or find actors, or find directors, they have projects that they like to do as well. And they say, here, read this. And sometimes they say to you, well, we'll do your show, but will you do ours first, ours first? And so in the case of Avatar, in all fairness, I would like to say that, you know, I read the script and I didn't, Avatar is a huge franchise that was created by Jim Cameron, who comes from a background of huge hits. And the truth is there's very few people in the American film industry that can dictate the terms of how they're making a movie, but Jim Cameron is one. And so it was his idea from the very beginning. And then after the Avatar you saw became such a huge hit, the studio, of course, wanted to do a sequel because they wanted more money. And so he said, okay, we'll do a sequel, but I want to develop, he has a lot of interest. He's a very unusual filmmaker. You know, some filmmakers just think film. Jim has got, you know, he went to the Mariana Trench, the deepest place on the planet, in 2012, after the first Avatar, and he had other things that he wanted to do. At times, a lot of people don't know, he was actually, had a title of Explorer in Residence at the National Geographic. So he has a lot of interest. So by the time I met Jim, he had made the painful realization that Avatar was going to be the rest of his life. It's just that simple. He created a monster that was so big he needed to do that. And he had written a script based on a Japanese manga comic called Alita Battle Angel. And it was that movie that he realized he didn't have the time to direct it anymore or produce it. And so they hired me, and Robert Rodriguez was the director. And we went off and made it. So that was my introduction to Jim. I know this is long-winded, but that's how I met Jim. And he has a producing partner, John Landau. And the two of them allowed me to make that movie in Austin, Texas, while they prepped Avatar. And I finished Alita Battle Angel, and I was getting ready to do another project, and they phoned me, and they said, would you help us out on Avatar? So when I read the script, it wasn't like, and again, I'm not sure how it works in India, but there are certain projects like Avatar. We have a lot of problems with piracy. We have a lot of problems with, you know, the internet break, and everybody. We have a lot of interest in a lot of problems with piracy, people taking ideas. So the screenplay wasn't one you could take home and read. You couldn't even take it into your office. And I've worked on a lot of projects where we kept it very secretive. But I'd never worked on a project where we had to go into a special room and read the project. And that's for everybody. That's actors, that's anybody involved with a project. And there were only I think there were very, very few people on that show that read the script, that were allowed to take the script. And I think maybe there were 3 or 4 actors that were allowed to do that. So in answer to your question, I was very blessed. I came onto a project that was fully crewed and fully staffed, and art department had been hired. And many people, even though it was 12 years later, many people from the first Avatar were still waiting to, and working on Avatar 2. So I just got on board the ship.
That answers the question. Thank you. Any more? Yes. Volunteers, just so that we can take as many questions as possible. We come to you, sir.
Hello, sir. Hello, ma'am. So, my question is, how do you deal with burnouts? Like, for example, if you're working on a project for a really long time, for example, the second Avatar movie, it was in production for a really long time. So if you're working on something continuously for a while, you know after a while, you know either the actors or the directors get a mental block, or like you can't, you need some break. So how do you deal with that?
So, if you're continuously working on a project, don't you get burnt out and tired? Also, the example he gave was actors burning out and
Other
writers.
team members.
I also want to understand what a producer's burnout is. Does that mean you're running out of money and resources? What is a producer's burnout? Is there something like that?
I mean, I'm not sure a producer can really burn out.
Yeah.
After a project wraps, you can hibernate, you can go off and try to relax. But I mean, your question is very, very valid. It's a good question. I mean, it's very hard. I think the actors probably have the toughest time, and especially on a movie like Avatar, because they're working in an artificial environment, and luckily, with the technology getting better and better, a lot of times these actors have to act to a tennis ball. Let's say a Navi is 9 feet tall, right? So just your eye line is always looking up. So somebody's got to hold the tennis ball up there, and you're looking at a tennis ball. That's how the first Avatar was made. And now the second one, the technology has gotten better, and so now we can have screens up there that really have an image of what they're reacting to. And also, the movie business is changing very quickly because technology is changing very quickly. And there's always 3 stages of production. There's prep, there's shoot, and there's post. And now post has become prep in a lot of the world, because with a movie like Avatar, you have people who normally you would hire during post-production, you now hire them during pre-production, because all those environments, if you saw Avatar 2, you saw all the ocean work and all the tropical work, those environments are all created far in advance of the first day of shooting. So when the actors finally come on the set, instead of having a tennis ball and them trying to use their imagination, they actually have some graphics up there. There's an environment they can interact with. It may just be, literally, it could be just tape on a string, which later becomes a leaf on a tree, but they have something. So but the burnout factor, where it comes into play, is on a movie like, again, I don't know much about Indian cinema in terms of the production requirements. I don't know how long it takes to make a movie here, or what the budgets are. But on Avatar, we had a director who's very precise and knows exactly what he wants. And it's very rare to work on a movie where a director has taken the time, and if you look at the credits, he gets an editing credit because he spends a lot of time in the editing room, but he also spent a lot of time working with the writers. And what happened between the 12 years or 13 years between Avatar 1 and Avatar 2 is the writers, he hired writers to write Avatar 2, the one that's out now, and the studio keeps asking, why is it taking so long? Why is it taking so long? Well, part of the reason is he would go off to the Mariana Trench, and he would do all these other extracurricular activities he had. But and so then he came up with the idea that they would do 2 and 3 together, so it would be more efficient, it would be more economical. And so that's what we did. We shot 2 and 3 back to back. So the one that comes out, the Avatar that comes out on December 20th, 2024, it's already finished in terms of live action. Now, it's not finished in terms of all the visual effects. It takes a very long time. So when you talk about burnout, I mean, these visual effects artists these days, there's going to be people on the Avatar franchise that I've already seen it. I mean, just on the Avatar 2 that we did, you see them go through marriages and divorces, and they have kids, and they get, it goes on and on. So there are other people, I mean, I guess that your question is really directed at a director. How does the director not get burnt out? Because the director's got to be the captain of the ship. He's got to be the leader. He's got to be the general. And he's got to march forward, and he's got to be sure of his vision, because there's a lot of people he's leading. And in most films, you know, when I used to do the Clint Eastwood films, I saw a crew picture, a crew photo recently, just last week, and there were like 50 people, maybe 50 people it took to make Pale Rider was the picture I was looking at. And on Avatar, it took thousands of people. And a lot of people like myself, I was on Avatar 2 and Avatar 3 for 3.5 years. And I promise you, I spent the least amount of time in the movie than a lot of the people. So production designers never left from the first Avatar. So they've been on these movies for 13, 14 years now. And so the burnout factor, everybody has to adjust, because when I got into the business, you know, again, I'm not sure how Indian movies work, but American movies, the average typical shooting day is 12 hours, which means you usually spend about 13 and 14 hours at work, because there's makeup and hair and there's wrapping, especially if you're in production. But it's okay, and you resign yourself to the fact that you're just going to work really hard, very intense for 12 weeks, 14 weeks, whatever the time period of the shoot is. But on something like Avatar, we photographed it for 3 years. You know, I mean, it's crazy, but we did. And again, it's an anomaly. Most movies are not made like this, but the most successful movie ever was Avatar 1, in terms of, when I say successful, I'm talking about box office numbers. So when you have a movie of that magnitude and you want to try to follow it up, Jim Cameron is just a very detailed director. Every every frame of that movie has been gone over by him. So I hope I answered your question about burnout, but it's always, burnout even on a short film is an issue. But as a director or as a producer, you can't let that, you have to put that behind you. You know, put your energy in the next day. You have to lead by example, is what I'm trying to say.
Before we get to that, gentleman, then a quick question to you, David. Have you considered producing an Indian film, and I'm using the word Indian encompassing all our regional films? Have you consumed any Indian film? Because I knew a lot of the students were saying you were very keen to watch Pathan. So I'm just curious, have you watched Indian films, and have you given it a thought of producing?
No, I've never really given a thought of producing an Indian film, because not that I don't want to.
It's okay.
No, there are a lot of elements that I think I would like a lot. I'm thinking of this movie we watched the other night, The Fan. I mean, the action was very good. Do you know this? And
Yes, no.
Anyway, I watched it and I really liked it for many reasons, but I thought the action was very good. I'm not afraid of challenges, and I'm not afraid. In fact, I enjoy working with different cultures and different, I did a movie a few years ago called Point Break, a sequel to the original Point Break, and we shot in 13 different countries with, 13 different crews, and it was great. I enjoy that. It just takes, there's not a right or correct way of making a movie. Every culture comes to their own conclusion on how best to make a movie. And it's my job usually to try to integrate the two systems between an English crew or an American crew and an Indian crew, let's say. So, no, I would welcome that challenge with the right script and somebody like the actor King Khan.
King Khan. Just applause for King Khan. He has another following of some crazy kinds.
Yeah, so no, I would be happy to do that if given the opportunity. But again, I just don't know that. What for me, what I like, what I even said last night is the way I look at film or art is I like that it can transcend one culture. You know and when you have that magical moment when a foreign audience, when an Indian audience reacts to the movie that you produced. And Avatar is a good example because that seems to resonate with a lot of cultures, whether you're Chinese or South American or whoever. You can relate to some of the themes or the characters of the filmmaking in that movie. So, I've spent most of my career trying to make movies that would be seen by a mass audience and that would have a universal appeal. And in Indian movies, even though I was very blessed to, when I was at the university in Canada, we did watch some usually Bollywood films, and I would actually love it, especially when they broke out in song and dance. I thought it was great. I didn't understand it, and it was almost like an intermission in the movie, and then everybody was having fun, and then they would go back to the plot. But it's just a different. It's a different sensibility. But I enjoyed it. So it's not to say I wouldn't do it, but I'm not sure. As a producer, I would probably need a good Indian producing partner on something like that. And again, for me as a producer, the director is the key thing. Is getting if you fall in love with a screenplay, a lot of times the job of selecting a director, or if the director has a project like an Avatar where they asked me to come aboard, I had already been introduced to Jim Cameron, like I said, on Alita Battle Angel, but I wanted the opportunity to really work with him on a daily basis and see how he's just such an anomaly, with his films. His films, most people know in the States that his films always go over schedule, they always go over budget, and not by a little, but by a lot. And so, when I first started there, people would say to me, well, the schedule is 100 days, but it's going to be 200 days. And, it became 300 days. And the same with the money. So but then again, it's kind of an old saying in Hollywood, you're only as good as your last film. But if you look at his last film, it was Avatar 1, it was 13 years ago. And then the one before that was Titanic, and the one before that was, Terminator, and then The Abyss, and he's a good horse to bet on, you're lucky to be in business with him, but as I was saying, some directors, though, if you fall in love with a material, a screenplay, you want a director that shares your passion, not necessarily your vision, because you don't want to handicap a director into doing, just doing a paint by numbers movie the way that you want to see it, but getting his spin on it, because that's what directing is all about.
And also, I love the fact that he said Avatar resonated with every culture, be it China and India. On a lighter note, a lot of the senior citizens in my society actually thought it's a religious film, because they said Santoshi Maa ke Avatar hai. So they thought Avatar also has a Sanskritized sort of meaning, right? So Avatar means, kaise samjhaye? Avatar is incarnation. So they thought it's religious, and sort of, the whole group were a little disappointed that it was blue people and not religion. But over to you, sir. No question. Something.
First of all, it is a really great honor to have you among us, and I would also want to thank the university administrators for arranging for my my question would be very specific to my personal preferences, and there is a movie in your filmography. Kevin Costner movie,
Oh, Perfect World?
A Perfect World.
Uh-huh.
So this actually is a movie which affected me a lot, and then also, so this is during my early 20s that I could get to see this movie, and so there is a kind of a very strong kind of an idealism, kind of a alpha, lone, male, dominant male, misunderstood kind of very, very strong expression, kind of a nuance that which is what affected me as well as some of my batchmates, some of my friends, close friends at that point in time. And so this is again the time when probably some of the later Clint Eastwood greats have also been also come up. So I would like to get some sense of your some account of what was going on in Bollywood at that point in time. Specifically if you could talk about Kevin Costner and then this specific movie.
Okay. A Perfect World was a movie that we did make and I did produce with another producer by the name of Mark Johnson. And I'm trying to remember, Perfect World came after In the Line of Fire for me. And so, and it was interesting because as a producer, like I said earlier, there's different responsibilities in the sense that, you know, sometimes I have the project and I try to put it together with the various elements and attachments, and sometimes I don't. And Clint and I had just finished a movie called In the Line of Fire, and we were getting ready to figure out what we were going to do next. And I'll digress a little because in the meantime, somebody sent me a script, which was probably the best script I'd ever read. It was amazing. And they asked me to produce it, and the writer did. And I wanted to do it so badly. But then Clint came to me and he said, listen, Mark Johnson has Kevin Costner and a screenplay I kind of like. Will you read this? And should we maybe do this next? And I was really torn because I really wanted to do this other screenplay, even though I'd been working with Clint regularly. So, and the other screenplay, there was no. The other screenplay was the Shawshank Redemption, Rita Hayworth in the Shawshank Redemption. And it was by a first-time writer, Frank Darabont, who had never had any. And Frank Darabont had insisted that he was going to be the director on Shawshank Redemption. And so the studio was a different studio than the one I was working for. It was Columbia Pictures. They were, no, I take that back, it was Castle Rock, and I think it was a Warner Brothers release. But anyway, everybody was really nervous about a first-time director that was a writer, and he had been offered an enormous amount of money to part with a script, and with more and more money, he kept saying no, no, no. So they finally had to acknowledge that he wanted to direct it. So anyway, I so wanted to do that movie, and but Clint brought because Mark Johnson had a relationship with Clint prior to my relationship with Clint. Clint said, why don't you read the script, I like it. And so that's how we ended up doing The Perfect World, because you're right, that's a very unusual Clint Eastwood vehicle. And pairing Clint with Kevin Costner was, at the time, I think it was around the early 90s, I think it was 92, 93, somewhere in there, we did that movie. But we really had two of the biggest superstars in Hollywood, Kevin Costner and Clint Eastwood. Kevin was coming off of Dances with Wolves, and Clint was Clint, you know? And so that's how we did it. It was not a screenplay that we developed in-house at Malpaso. And it was very unusual in that respect, because most of the movies we did with Clint or at Malpaso, which is his production company, were movies that did not have attachments. we put them together with, Clint usually decided to direct them. Occasionally not, occasionally, like in The Line of Fire, Wolfgang Peterson was the director. That was a movie that came to us as a good screenplay. But with A Perfect World, and it's interesting because Kevin and I did a movie in 2004 called Open Range, another movie. And so we met each other on that movie, and the thing I liked about Kevin, or a lot of actors, is that Kevin is, he's an actor, or he's, now everybody knows him from Yellowstone, but he's also a director and a producer. He wears the three hats very responsibly. And but that was my introduction to Kevin. And at the time, we were, Mark and I often talked about the fact that we were two really lucky producers because we had the two biggest stars in Hollywood in a movie together. So the movie itself didn't appeal to most of the executives at the studios, but it did appeal to actors, and especially Kevin's role. And I don't think Kevin, it was an interesting, I'm trying to remember, I don't think he came to the premiere on that movie. He may have been shooting Wyatt Earp at the time, another movie. But when I worked with Kevin for about 3 years, 2004 to 2006 or 7, and many times he knew that was one of his better movies, because it was a character that didn't have a lot of flash to him. I mean, the character was a convict, who was on the lam. He was trying to escape with a young boy, so anyway, I can't even tell you, I think it was not that successful at the box office. I think it was okay, but not a huge success. So anyway, it came to us, is the answer. Yeah.
Hello, sir. Hello. First of all, a big fan of your work. I wanted to ask you a question that I don't know if that this is a problem in Hollywood or not. In Hollywood, this is a very big problem called cancel culture. So,
Cancel culture,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Okay.
so I'll give an example. Recently, the movie Pathaan, which we would like to see. In that movie, there's this song in which the actress was wearing a specific color, and apparently it offended some religion. So, due to that, boycott trend started all over India, which affected the industry and the movie very much. So, how do you think an industry should tackle problems like cancel culture?
It's not an easy question.
Yes. And I'm so glad that, as a moderator, we've been told not to ask, and Daddy asked. I didn't, the audience did. Thank you.
I guess I'll try to answer your question like the best. It's my opinion. I'll take full responsibility. I mean, I make movies that go out of I try not to offend people. I said earlier, the movies I produce, I don't really want to just aim for a niche audience, a small audience. I'm looking for a big audience. And yet at the same time, if you try to be politically correct with everything, you're going to make a vanilla movie. You need some curry in there. You need some spice. And it's a delicate, I'm not sure I can answer the question with an answer that's going to be a general answer and work in every situation. I would have to specifically address it in the situation as it pertains to me, but I would be very sensitive to hurting, and this is way before it became, right now it's fashionable, right? The term cancel culture or LGBTQB, that ratings and all that. It's just being a responsible filmmaker. I don't want to depict people in a negative position or make fun of their religion and at the same time, if the story is hinging on that element, then that's an issue you have to wrestle with. And I'm just trying to think in my own movies, if maybe you could tell me if you feel an example in some of the movies I've produced where there's an element that we danced around.
No, I was asking that those allegations that the people, the boycotters put on the movie producers or the filmmakers, those are very vague and they are not like based on facts. So people just want to cancel some people and that is why they make things up to cancel the movie or the actor or the actress. So how does an industry tackle that problem? The movie is in no way offensive to any religion or anybody, but still they make something up from the movie. They take some scenes out from it. They take some dialogues without the actual context of the movie, and then they use it to cancel the movies or boycott the movies or the people working in them. So how do we our industry tackle that?
I'm not trying to avoid your question. I'm just trying to answer it responsibly. As you were talking, one example came to mind right now. I was just in this room. Look at Will Smith, the slap. I mean, is that a case of cancel culture? Should I go out of my way as a producer and try to find a vehicle for him, a script for him, and try to get him back and try to I don't have any interest in that, I don't approve of his actions, but he got himself into that mess, and I think he's going to have to get himself out of that mess. But do I want to risk investors' money or studios' money on a movie by putting him in it when I know that he's already alienated a huge audience? I don't think so. That's not me. Maybe, Will Smith has got, and I'm just using him as an example. I don't really know him. I've only met him a couple of times. But when I put the elements together for a movie, again, as a producer, you're walking a tightrope. You're walking there's a business decision. You're trying to make a movie responsibly on budget for whatever the financier or your studio has told you they'll give you in terms of money. And at the same time, you're trying to deal with the artistic side of it and let the director open his wings and fly with the project. And if somebody right now, if I had a project and a casting director or somebody suggested, Will Smith would be great on that, I would have to say no, he's a liability. Movies are tough enough to make. There's so many things we cannot control, look at, I'm going to digress again for a moment here, but look at Avatar 2. We can sit here and we can say it's a huge success. It's the fourth, or it's soon to be the third biggest movie of all time. But a year and a half ago, it was on life support. A year and a half ago, we were in the middle of a pandemic, and nobody was going to the movies because the cinemas were closed. And then the cinemas opened and then they closed again. And then they opened and they closed again. And everybody was very content with watching movies from their streamers and laying on the couch and being able to put it on pause and go to the kitchen and so there was a lot of talk in Hollywood and amongst us about what are we going to do, because you have a ginormous investment in Avatar 2 and 3 and 3. Now it looks smart, but a year and a half ago it didn't look so smart that we had done two movies together and had spent twice as much money as we could have, given that there was a huge decline in the audience attending movies. But luckily, I think what's happened is the pandemic, everybody did stream a lot of movies, but they also, when you make a movie like Top Gun, which was, I think, the end of the pandemic from the cinematic world. You know, Tom Cruise was smart enough, and Tom, not as the actor, but Tom as a producer, was smart enough to keep, he knew the movie was finished, but he waited months and months and months, and then when he really thought that it was now time to release that movie came out at a time when people were so anxious to get out of their homes and go see a movie like Top Gun. And so that started the ball rolling again. And then Black Panther, I think, was the second one. And then Avatar. And Avatar, you know, we shot it in stereo, in 3D. And so that's a very expensive way of shooting a movie. It's much easier to shoot it in a conventional 2D way and then convert it later. So what I'm trying to say is that it was made for the big screen. It was made, I mean, if you haven't seen Avatar, I would suggest you see it in 3D. And if you see it in 3D, I would say try to see it in IMAX if you can, because that's how Jim was thinking, and I think that's the way you have to think. You know, as a response, again, a filmmaker in cancel culture, excuse me, there's technology is moving so quickly. Why not embrace IMAX? Why not embrace 3D? And really, not that every movie needs to be in IMAX and every movie needs to be 3D, but there are certain movies, like an Avatar, that it really enhances and embellishes the experience. So, you know, getting back to your question, I would have to, I mean, you have to weigh everything. Everything, it's just a huge puzzle you're always putting together. You have to be, you just can't live in a tunnel vision world on your project and not be sensitive to everything else going around you all the time. So there are certain issues, whether it's, I don't know, let's say hiring a gay actor who's come out, you know, who's out of the closet, and there's some controversy to that. Yeah, that's an issue that bothers me far less. I would say if the actor's right for the movie, I'd hire him or her. You know, it's so that doesn't bother me as much as somebody that, you know, went up in front of a group of people and slapped a fellow comedian. And I think he'll be, I mean, he was punished by the Academy, and I think he'll continue to be punished in his career, unfortunately. So, I'm not sure, again, another question, I'm not sure if I really answered, but I tried to.
It's not easy to answer. There's a young lady there who else you have one. Can we come to you a little later? Just after this, yeah?
Right. So cinema, from its conception, has always been an art form for the people. But through streaming, it's gone a lot easier to consume, and what we're consuming has also been toned down a lot. So do you think that the art form is changing? The art form adapting to the medium it's conveyed through is harmful to the art form?
What is harmful? Sorry, what is your question?
Is the medium hurting the art form? Is streaming hurting the art form that cinema is?
Is the medium...
It's becoming easier, it's becoming faster, you can look at your phone while you don't really have to pay attention. Is that hurting the art form that cinema is?
I'm not sure I really understand the question. Is the medium hurting the art form?
Yeah, which means now there's quick accessibility. You can watch it on the phone. You don't really need to go to a theater, be it theater or films. You know, so is this kind of a flexibility that's the best I can hurting the art form?
No, I mean, you know, if you asked me that question 10 years ago, I would have said, yeah, you can't watch it on an iPhone. You can't watch it on an iPad. You know, it's made for a big screen. But, you know, you can watch it on an iPhone, I think, and I don't think it's hurting the business at all. It's just that you as a consumer have the choice. And if you want to watch it on your iPhone, then God bless you. But I would much rather watch it in IMAX and 3D if it's available at a cinema. And yet at the same time, I just said a minute ago, I watched this movie, The Fan, the other night. I watched it on the plane, I would have rather watched it at a cinema, but because it was a plane, that was the thing that was accessible and available, I watched it. So I don't think it is hurting. I mean, you're a different generation than mine, and I can remember this argument 10 years ago where nobody was going to watch a movie on an iPhone. And I've got a lot of, younger friends that do watch movies on iPhones. And if that's the way you want to consume a movie, but, why not, if you're, why not have the best? If you can take a Volkswagen Beetle to the store, or you can take a Lamborghini. They're both going to get you there. Once in a while it might be nice to get in the Lamborghini. So I would say my opinion would be no, it's not hurting.
Also, one last question, because just come to the question.
Technically speaking, there are a lot of skills an actor has. So, a person who's not on screen, what would you expect for an actor to have, like the technical knowledge or the skill set that will make the work of people off screen better or easier?
Okay, thank you for your question. An actor really doesn't, again, I'm not an actor, okay? So, and there are some actors that I'm sure are very cognizant of the technical limitations or interested in the technical things. Most actresses I've worked with are very sensitive to, especially leading ladies, on where they stand and how they're lit. They know more about lighting than I do. But an actor, what I try to do as a producer, and what I try to do more significantly as a first assistant director, because a first assistant director, if you don't know, and I don't know if it's the same in Indian culture, because actually I see on an Indian movie, sometimes, 3 assistant directors, and then there's somebody else called, I don't quite understand all the titles, but in American cinema, the first assistant director is the boss of the set. He does everything to try to make the director's job easier, It's that simple. So what I try to do as a producer, and what I've always tried to instill in my assistant directors, and hopefully the director, that's another conversation sometimes, is to create an environment that's conducive for an actor to do their best work. And that's difficult at times, because you've got the sound mixer reading the newspaper over there, and somebody else is reading their phone over there. And that's really quite disrespectful, I think, that when an actor comes onto the set, he or she isn't given the respect for their craft to do. It's just like we give the lighting crew, it seems like, too much time to always light a shot, right? We give the camera crew lots of times to tape out how much time they need in the shot, how to rack focus and everything they need. We give all the departments plenty of time to do their job professionally, but then we call in the actors and we expect them to act like a trained animal. They're not. And they're the most important people, really, on the set, because it's their performance that's going to really make or break your film. So, like I said earlier, I'm always amazed, I'm in awe of most actors on how they can do what they do, but that's part of their training. So when you ask about the technical aspects of it, the best actors I know don't worry about the technical aspects. What they're worried about is an honest performance. They're trying to get an honest moment. They're trying to get inside of a character and embellish those characteristics, those sensibilities, which are very oftentimes the opposite of what they are as a person. So I think it's really, really important. And I had a professor at UCLA. His name was Michael Gordon, and he taught directing. And Michael Gordon used to do all the Rock Hudson and Doris Day movies. And he used to say something that I think I've repeated it throughout my career, and that's 90% of directing is casting. and I trust me, because I've worked with directors who didn't know an f-stop from a bus stop. But they knew how to, if we cast the movie correctly and you trusted your actors, because once you cast them, you have to trust them. And if you don't, I mean, it's a terrible time, and I've had to do it before, when you fire an actor, when it's just not working. There's not chemistry between the two characters, the male and the female, or the male and the male, female, whatever. And it's just not working, then you have to go back and reshoot everything. That's a terrible situation. But once you cast, and it's the same with your crew members, you don't take it lightly. Everybody should be cast properly, and you take your time. But the cast are kind of special. And like I said, it always bothers me to no end that we give the various departments on a show too much time to do their roles, and then we expect the actor to come in, hit their mark, say their lines, give a performance that's meaningful. And so I'm not interested I know actors who do know the technical side of filmmaking, but their job is to try to give life to a fictitious character. And so we have to create those environments that make it safe for them to do so. Okay?
David, may I add to that, please? Because I've had problems with directors when we are rehearsing before we shoot. And once I had to actually get up and say, what is important? You're not giving me 10 minutes to figure out the scene, and you're more worried about the lighting. So let me know what's more important, and then we'll shoot. It's a huge issue. No, it is today. Because somewhere, I think I was speaking about this morning, that the whole technique of filmmaking is overpowering the content and the performance. It's a huge problem I find today with a lot of stuff that I'm seeing on television. So what you're trying to say doesn't reach out to me because of the technique and all the externals which are supposed to help the content and the performance.
I mean, I'm a storyteller, and I'm proud of it. And the stories I want to tell are the scripts that I've read that we're trying to make into a movie. And I still believe that we can connect with a character on screen that we don't know, that doesn't have the stigma of a superstar or somebody, as long as they're giving an honest performance. But it's really the technical side of filmmaking. I mean, trust me, I mean, on Avatar, it was all technical, and yet at times there was great respect for the actors to do their job, and it was very difficult for them because of, you know what I was saying.
But that's the balance that you're trying to find.
Yeah, there is a balance, but still, if I had to say, have the actor do their work, their scene in half a light, so the lighting guys only have 10 minutes instead of 20 minutes, I would go for giving the actor the time over getting it technically right. But that's me. I'm sure there are other producers who think differently, or other directors who think differently. But ultimately, I'm not on the screen, and I'm just putting all of the components and elements together. It's the actors who are on screen, and it's the actors that the audience really wants to see. So I'm just trying to say, I try to provide a safe sandbox for them to play in.
Yeah, that's it. Yep. No, I understand, but I've had this problem on the sets very often. And I said, you guys have had 1 hour to set up the scene, and you're giving me 5 minutes. It's not fair. I need 10 to 15 minutes. Because I'm going to be there up on that screen. That's what's going to be seen. You've had your time, now it's my time, and I want my time.
Well, you know, one of the problems we do have in film is rehearsal time. And I don't know how the Indian cinema industry works, but in Hollywood, normally by contract, we get actors for 2 weeks of rehearsal prior to principal photography starting. And so most directors that I've worked with use those 2 weeks, and it's consumed with makeup and hair and costume fittings, and it's not really spent with rehearsal time with the actors. Now, saying that, I can tell you that I've done 4, but 3 movies where he directed with Francis Coppola. And Francis, first of all, he fights for 4 weeks of rehearsal, and usually gets it. And what we do is, those 4 weeks are usually just before shooting, and we know what the sets look like, and the sets are taped out in a gymnasium kind of setting, and we work from 8 o'clock in the morning till
With the actors.
7 or 8 at night, and the actors show up. There's no stand-ins. It doesn't matter if you're a big star or a day player. You come in there and you work, so that when we do go in to shoot, and the guys take an hour for lighting, and the actors come in,
They know what we're going into.
they know what's
Absolutely.
expected. But Francis also is he's a great director for a number of
It's
reasons.
one of a kind. We don't have that luxury here at all.
But watching Francis work, he will throw a tantrum. He'll throw an absolute hissy fit with people trying to take time away from him and his actors. And I think that because I worked with him early in my career, a lot of that rubbed off on me. And Francis, uses a lot of theater actors too. And sometimes, when you talk, you asked me the question about acting and technique. A lot of actors we have in Hollywood, I don't know if they want to be actors as much as celebrities, or they want to appear on TikTok or whatever. And if you really want to be an actor, you're a well-rounded actor. You should be able to do a music video and a play and a TV show and a film, and you need that kind of versatility.